Hi, I'm Dr. Joan Abatio. I'm a psychiatry resident, and today I'm here to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, or what we call PTSD. Do you know what PTSD is? Is it like depression? Well, growing up, I used to hear the word PTSD, mostly in relation to the war that had gone on in Gulu at the time. Do you know the symptoms of PTSD? Before we find out, I want to tell you a story of a man named Peter. So there was a man named Peter, and one day he was watching TV. They were running a story on television about a plane crash. So Peter watched TV and he developed feelings of panic associated with thoughts that he was going to die. The panic disappeared in a few hours. However, for the next few nights, he had nightmares with obsessive thoughts about dying. He decided to see a psychiatrist.
Peter reported to the psychiatrist that his wife had been killed in a plane crash over 10 years ago. He, however, described that he had adapted to the loss normally, and he was aware that his current symptoms were probably related to the traumatic event. While in psychotherapy, he realized that his reactions to his wife's death were only muted and that his relationship with her was ambivalent.
So at the time of her death, Peter was actually contemplating divorce. He didn't love his wife anymore and he actually wished her dead. So in part, he had suppressed those feelings. He was able to recognize his feelings of guilt related to his wife, and the need for punishment was manifested by him thinking that he was going to die. So what is PTSD? Just like the word post-traumatic stress disorder, it is a disorder that occurs after a traumatic event. It is marked by increased stress and anxiety following the stressful event. So first, you're exposed to a traumatic event. It could be an actual or threatened death. It could be a serious injury. It could be sexual violence. Name it. And exposure to the traumatic events is in different ways. You could have experienced it directly. Maybe you were raped, or maybe you were directly involved in a serious tragic accident. Or you could have witnessed in person the event occurring to someone else. Or you could have learned that the traumatic event occurred to a close family member or a friend. So in this case, like in the story I told you, Peter learned that the traumatic event occurred to his wife. Exposure could be through experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of traumatic events. This is in case of, say, policemen, who are usually first responders to collecting human remains after tragic accidents. Or it could be medical personnel who work in emergency units, in casualty units. So you're frequently exposed extremely to, these traumatic details of events. And something to really note, exposure does not include exposure through media, through electronic devices, through movies, through television. No, that doesn't qualify for exposure to a traumatic event. You have to have witnessed it, you have to have experienced it, learned that it occurred to a family member or a close friend, or you have repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of traumatic events. So because of this exposure, what happens? You get intrusion symptoms. And intrusion symptoms occur in different ways. Some people will have intrusive, distressing memories of the event. Like you can't help it, but all the time you have these memories of this event. Other people will have distressing dreams in which the content of the dream is related to the event. For example, the story I just told you about Peter, he was having nightmares. Other people will have what we call dissociative reactions. For example, flashbacks. You actually get complete loss of awareness of your present surroundings. It's like it's happening again in that moment. Other people will have prolonged intense psychological distress. You're psychologically tortured because of this event. Other people will have physiological reactions, maybe tremors, maybe panic attacks. In the story I told you, Peter was having panic attacks. So because of this, what happens is people will avoid any stimuli associated with the traumatic event, will just make efforts to avoid the distressing memories, the thoughts. Other people will actually avoid reminders of the event. It could be people, it could be places that remind them, it could be conversations that remind them of this event, activities, objects, situations. In the story I just told you, Peter thought he had mourned his wife. Peter thought he had gotten over his wife for so many years, probably because he constantly avoided any reminders of that event. And so today he's watching TV and he can't help it. The story on TV is about a plane crash, so it brings back memories. But for so many years, there were no memories. He was probably working towards avoiding any reminders. This is like a coping mechanism. Some people will, I'll give you an example of, let's say you were sexually assaulted at some point. So what happens once you get into a relationship? You don't want to have any sexual encounters with your partner because it brings back memories. And because of this avoidance, you get negative alterations in your cognition, in your mood, the way you think, the way you perceive things really changes, but negatively. Some people will actually have inability to remember important aspects of the traumatic event. Maybe your father died and you don't even remember the date he died. You don't even remember the important details. Some people will just have persistent and exaggerated negative beliefs or expectations about themselves or others. They may believe they're bad, they can't be trusted, the world is completely dangerous. Some people will blame themselves for the traumatic event, blame others, and other people will have persistent negative emotional state. So they're persistently fearful, persistently horrified, angry, they feel guilty all the time, they feel ashamed all the time. Others will have diminished interest in participation in significant activities. They may feel detached or estranged from others. They usually isolate themselves. Other people will have inability to experience positive emotions. Because something traumatic happened to you, you can't experience happiness anymore. Some people can't experience satisfaction. They can't experience loving feelings. Maybe you were in a traumatic relationship. So what happens after the relationship? Along the way, you can't feel loved. You can never feel loved. You can never love because of this very traumatic event. People eventually get alterations in their arousal and reactivity associated with the traumatic events. So you find that some people become irritable and have anger outbursts. You find that eventually someone becomes increasingly angry. There's little or no provocation, but they react outrageously. Their anger is at the top. They're quarreling all the time. They are very irritable. Others will have reckless behavior. We react differently. So other people will have reckless behavior, self-destructive behavior, because you were raped, because you feel worthless, you feel it was your fault. Along the way, you decide to, probably engage in prostitution or any kind of destructive behavior, reckless behavior. Other people will resort to using drugs or anything like that. Well, some other people will just become hyper vigilant. Others will get an exaggerated startle response. Other people will have sleep disturbances. They can't fall asleep. They're restless during a sleep, or they can't maintain their sleep. Some people will have problems with concentration. So along the way, you can't concentrate. You can't pay attention to detail. Something to note, for it to be post-traumatic stress disorder, all these symptoms, all these things that I've told you should have gone on for a period of more than 1 month. If it is less than 1 month, it's acute stress disorder, but if it is more than 1 month, it is post-traumatic stress disorder. And this disturbance causes significant distress and impairment in your life. The way you become irritable, you have anger outbursts, you're constantly quarreling at home. It puts a strain on your relationship. At work, people don't want to associate with you because you're extremely irritable and you were raped as a child. So because of this, you avoid any sexual encounters with your partner, and this puts a strain on your relationship. So this really distresses your life along the way. You can't experience happiness, you're sad all the time because of this. So it really puts a strain on your life. Imagine every time you go to bed you're having nightmares, you can't sleep. So because you can't sleep during the day, you have a sleep insufficiency, you can't function well. So this is what post-traumatic stress disorder does to you. So the point of my videos is to help you discover, do you have any of these symptoms? Do you have post-traumatic stress disorder? Do you think you're depressed or anything like that? Please see a psychiatrist and get help. It can help to improve on your functionality, on your academic life. Maybe you can't concentrate very well, so you're performing poorly in school. Please see a psychiatrist, see a therapist. You will be helped. And I hope after this you know what PTSD is. Don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, to like, leave a comment. Till next time, bye bye.